Hi, it's Jen here, and I'm going to talk to you today about someone who changed things just by getting on a bus and sitting down. She was coming home from work, so I think she would have been a bit tired. It's really nice to sit down. Well, sad to say, in our world, people can treat each other badly just because their skin colour's different or because they come from somewhere else. And this has happened here in Australia with our Indigenous Australians, but it happens in lots of other countries. And about 60 years ago in the United States, in America, things were bad for some people, African Americans, because their skin was darker than other people's. And they had rules and laws that made their life hard. The person I'm going to tell you about today was called Rosa Parks, and she started to change things one day on a bus. And here's a picture of her. Now, this bus was like all the other buses in the city where Rosa lived. It had rules about where people could sit on the bus. So people with white skin, fair skin like mine, they could sit up the front of the bus in seats for them. People with darker skin, African Americans, were called coloureds. We wouldn't call them coloureds today. That's a pretty rude thing to call them, but that's what they were called. And they had to sit down the back of the bus. Worse than that, though, was a rule that if you were a coloured person or an African American person and the bus was full and a white person came on, you had to give up your seat to that white person. Even if you weren't well or even if you were tired, you still had to give up your seat. Well, Rosa got on the bus and she sat down. And then the bus got full. And then a person with white coloured skin got on and the bus driver told Rosa to give up her seat. And Rosa said, no. Well, the bus driver called the police and the police came along and they arrested Rosa. And they took her down to the police station and they charged her. Now, she had some friends who made sure that she didn't have to spend the night in jail there, but she had to go to court the next day and she got fined. Now, Rosa wasn't the only African American in that city. And when everyone else knew and heard what was happening, they decided that they weren't going to take any more. And this is what they did. They all said, we're not going to take any buses to go anywhere. And that's the grown-ups, the men and the women and the children. They didn't take the bus. They just had to go everywhere. Some of them might have had cars, but not many because they didn't have much money, quite a few of them. And some of them had friends with cars. Some of them even knew taxi drivers. Sometimes even places where they worked, people would give them a lift. But otherwise they just walked and they had to walk everywhere. And they didn't just do it for one day. They didn't just do it for 1 week. They didn't do it for 1 month. They did it for a whole year. And I think when those who walked, their shoes got worn out. I'll show you one of my worn out shoes. Pretty worn out. And that makes it hard to walk. And we read that churches all around America sent shoes to the people in this city so that they could keep walking. Of course, the people who owned the buses did not like this happening. That meant that they couldn't get any money to run the buses because no one was buying tickets. But they couldn't stop people not going on buses. I mean, no one was in fights, no one was getting hurt, and there isn't a law to make people go on buses. And they just couldn't make any money out of the buses. And as I told you, this went on for a year, and in the end, the city had to say those laws that affected the African Americans were not fair and they weren't going to go on, and people could just go on the bus and sit down where they wanted. In fact, the Supreme Court of America then also passed an opinion and said that this was not only not fair, it was not legal. So that was a good thing that happened. Now, Rosa Parks grew to be an old woman. Here's a picture of her when she's quite a bit older. And she was always famous for sitting down on the bus and saying no and starting to change things. Things didn't get better right away, but there were some improvements. There's still some problems in the USA today. There's still some problems in Australia, but things are better than they were, and we should be able to thank people like Rosa Parks, who started things just by saying no. I guess you're wondering about that bus. What happened to it? That bus actually ended up in a museum in America, and people can go in and sit on it. Here's a picture of what the inside of that bus looks like now. Well, when Rosa Parks died, the city wanted to honour her because by then she was very famous. And this is what they did. They got some black ribbon and they tied it round all the front seats of the bus. Do you remember that's where the white people with fair skin were able to sit, had to sit? They tied those around so in memory of her, and they did it for a whole week. And that was how they remembered Rosa Parks, the woman who changed things just by sitting down and saying no.